So this is lesson 1 of Macbeth that I will be going over. It will include some of the context and it's going to look at the opening scene. I'm going to go over the main points, so I'm not going to go deep into it. I'm just going to look at a few areas, so you can use this as revision or you can use it as something that you probably might not have gone over in lesson. So this is just giving you that little bit of a head start. So the first thing that I want to focus on is the exam. So when you're doing the exam, there are going to be 4 things that the examiner will be looking for. They will be looking for AO1, which is if you can read, understand and respond to the text. So they want to see if you can use quotations, that means relevant quotations to support your ideas. And then they're going to look at AO2, which is analysing language, form and structure using the correct subject terminology. So subject terminology are the key themes that you have learnt in class. And then you've got AO3, which is show an understanding of the relationships between text and the context in which they were written. And then you've got AO4, which is basically just spag. Right, so we're going to be looking at a few of them as we go along. So let's get started. So first thing I want to focus on is context. So consider the context of Macbeth. How can you link the pictures on the right to the play's social and historical context? So how can you link it to the background of Macbeth? I'm going to give you a few seconds. You can pause the video if you need more time, and then we'll get started. Right, so in the Jacobean era, when this was written, people were highly religious, and if you got involved with the supernatural, then that was seen as a blasphemous act or sacrilegious act, because they thought that supernatural is always going to bring you bad luck and you're going against God if you're getting involved with the supernatural, because the supernatural essentially is the devil. And we're going to look at a bit about this as we go along, and you can also do some research around it. I don't want to get too into it because I am conscious of the time. So let's get started. Context. So I want you to create 4 boxes like this. So you've got King James I on 1, Bonfire Night, The Globe, Witchcraft. And now, after you've done the 4 boxes, I want you to give yourself 6 minutes. And in that 6 minutes, I want you to write down as much things you can around these 4 areas. So you can pause your video now. Right, so I hope you gave yourself 6 minutes and we're going to get started. I'm going to go over the things that I already have, and if you haven't got down an area that I got down and you think, oh, that's a good idea, then please feel free to jot it down. I am going to give you time to read over it as well whilst I start, I use my own knowledge to talk about a few things, because I don't want it to be me just reading out things off the slides that I have. So, witchcraft. I'm going to give you a few seconds to read over it, and then I'm going to just quickly whiz over it as well. So as you can see, King James I wrote a book called Demonology, and when he wrote that book, it wasn't because he supported the witches in any way. In fact, he supported the witches in the way that he wanted them to be punished. He wanted the witches to be punished. He encouraged them to be punished. And he was very much into the supernatural, just like everyone else. So witchcraft was a big thing. And I'm pretty sure you guys know about witch hunting and how popular it was in that period and how it lasted for many, many years. You probably didn't know that it lasted for more than 150 years, but it did. So witchcraft is something that is that comes up in Macbeth, really, and you're going to see how cunning, manipulative they are. And one thing they do is they always talk in riddles, and you will also see how they are controlled by higher up beings, higher up supernatural beings. Right, the next one is the Globe Theatre. So again, I'm going to give you a few seconds to read over it. If I'm going too fast, then just pause the video. So again, with the Globe Theatre, it is an amazing theatre. It was Shakespeare's theatre, and it still exists to this day. So if you ever do go to London, I would recommend visiting the Globe Theatre. It's amazing. I can't put it into any more words than just amazing. So the Globe Theatre is a lot of the plays that Shakespeare wanted performing, and Macbeth was one of them. And you're probably thinking, how did Shakespeare get Macbeth performed in the Globe Theatre? How did he get the funding for it? So he was good friends with King James I. Now, King James I loved Macbeth, so he sponsored him, and that gave him quite a lot of money, and that meant he could fund for his theatres. So that brings us to King James I. Again, I'm going to give you a few seconds to read over it. If you need to pause the video, please do so. So King James I, as I said before, got along really well with Shakespeare, and Shakespeare would write his play Macbeth in favour of the king. So it was in a way giving out a warning to the audience that you should never go against the king and commit regicide, because it's not going to end well for you. So that was his intention, and that did obviously please King James I. And we also see some of the things that happened to King James I happen in the actual play Macbeth. So the last few lines, it says something about a storm that King James I had, and how his ship was almost wrecked in a storm, and once ship was sunk, the Queen of Scotland, but the rest survived. It's talking about how supernatural beings had control over storms in that era, and we will see that in Macbeth as we go further along. Obviously not in this lesson, but in the lessons that I will upload in the future. Right, moving on. The gunpowder plot. Now, that is something that you can read over, but if you're still struggling with understanding the gunpowder plot, that is our little blog that I've put up that you can type into your search engine and you can have a look at that. So the gunpowder plot included Guy Fawkes. Now, I'm sure you heard of Guy Fawkes. He is the reason why we celebrate bonfire night, and the reason why we celebrate it is because Guy Fawkes tried to blow up the Parliament with King James I in it, and obviously he was caught, he was arrested, and he was tortured in a very, very brutal manner. Obviously, torturing is brutal as it is, but his went a step further. Now, I'm not going to get into the nitty-gritty of it, but you can research that at your own discretion. And what happened was that they burnt him alive at the end, and this is what we see today. We see someone, when you go to a Guy Fawkes exhibition, you'll see a scarecrow being burnt alive, and that's supposed to be Guy Fawkes. So you can see how it does, in a way, link him with Macbeth, because in Macbeth, the play is all about treason and overthrowing the king and the downfall of his murderers. And you can see the similarities between Guy Fawkes and Macbeth. Alright, moving forward now. So what I want to do is I want to have a look at Act 1, Scene 1. And we're going to look at how Shakespeare has opened the play and why he has opened it in that way. On the right hand side of my slide, I know it's got activities, but I want to ignore that because I just want to solely focus on the annotations that I've got. So, this scene is written in 13 lines, and that number 13, is viewed as an unholy number. When Shakespeare wrote this scene, he may have only done 13 lines, as the witches are unholy and from hell. So if you've looked at Macbeth, you'll notice that every other act and scene is not as short as this. It opens up with 13 lines, so you've got that bit where you can talk about Shakespeare's intention, and this is definitely something you can include. And also there was this spiritual belief that witches came in threes, and again that number 3 was an unlucky number. And then we've got thunder and lightning. So it's very common to use thunder and lightning to create pathetic fallacy, because it creates a sense of foreboding danger and hints at the theme of the supernatural that runs throughout the play. But in Macbeth, whenever the witches arrive, there's always thunder and lightning. It's like Shakespeare is using thunder and lightning as a dramatic technique to introduce them or to warn the audience that they are about to arrive. So I would call that a reoccurring motif because it does come up a few times. And then it says, when the hurly-burly is done. Hurly-burly is just basically battle. And then the witch also says, when the battle's lost and won. So this tells the audience that they can foreshadow the future. If they can foreshadow the future, they obviously have some sort of power. And then it says, upon the heath. So that's where the witches will meet. And that is basically just an open field. So the witches, supernatural beings, they always hang around in places that are isolated, barren, or deserted. And then the witches mention their pets, such as toads and cats. And then there's a famous line that the witches use: fair is foul and foul is fair. So they're basically saying good is bad and bad is good. So they're talking in riddles at this point. And what's interesting is that Macbeth's first word mimics the witches through inverse order, linking him to them and foreshadowing the harmful effects of their prophecy. So what I want to look at is the point, evidence, technique, analysis, and link. Now, obviously, I haven't gone over everything in this. This is just a little bit of a revision sort of lesson. But what I want you to do is I want you to have a go at that question. Obviously, you don't have to, but I would like you to have a try if you can. So, how does Shakespeare use language to present the characters of the witches? So, firstly, Shakespeare presents the witches as, and then you say how they're being presented, and then he creates this impression by. So at this point you need to use evidence, so that's quotation. Now that doesn't mean you have to use something that they say. You can use a stage direction, that's absolutely fine. And then techniques, so Shakespeare's use of, and then you need to make sure you're using the correct terminology. You need to say why it's effective, and then you need to analyze it. So you can talk about, this is effective because a contemporary audience may have thought, or you may say a Jacobean audience may think. So really try and link it to context in the analysis section. And the link is, you link it to the actual question. So perhaps Shakespeare presents the witches in this way because, so you're looking at Shakespeare's intention, that's how it gets you into the higher bands. And what you can do is you can use the 3 following terms I've put down. You should know what these terms are. If you don't, what I would advise you to do is just have a quick look over them on the internet. And if you have any questions, just make sure you put it down in the comment below and I'll try and get back to you. And then what I've done is I've also put down as to what your work could look like, so you can have a quick read of this. And if you're stuck, consider a few of the following things that I've put at the bottom. So I hope this has helped you, and if you have any questions, again, you can just comment down below and I'll try and get back to you as soon as possible. I hope you found this interesting and useful. Just so you know, I will be uploading more revision lessons that you could use.